Kia ora, good day, hello. Let's all just get up for 10 seconds and have a bit of a jiggle. It's the afternoon. I think we probably need that, or do a stretch or something, get a bit motivated. I'm going to run you through quite a few little bits and pieces while you're jiggling. And yes, I'm an architect from Melbourne.
Hey,
Come across the ditch,
waves.
Mexican waves. Let's just move a bit. And here to help you help explain some of the principles I've worked with and clients I've used with clients to make things more understandable, and how I communicate what I do, which as an architect modeling passive house buildings is really important to be able to explain this every day and bring it down also in an Australian context, because in Australia we have a system that already gives us a threshold of what we need to meet for building standards, which have heating and cooling loads and total loads. So have you ever wondered about how the data available at your fingertips can be a catalyst for good? However, have you found the passive house planning package to be too complicated for others to understand effectively? Well, I think we've all been here, and I think and I'll get to that point a bit later. So we got to communicate clearly early on, because we give a darn. And what does that mean? So a generalist with excellent communication skills is going to be the most effective goal setter, because they have a lot of understanding about all different things and they're able to communicate that understanding on point. Good communication requires a connection with emotion. Emotion always brings people across, as we've heard. And this is something that if we tap into it and we make people understand the way that we understand about something, the emotions we bring to something, super helpful. So we need an analogy that people understand. And so this is how I explain to clients initially about how I go. So here's Phil. Could be Phil for philosophy, or Phil for passive house, or whatever you want. Anyway, there's Phil. Phil is uninfluenced, he's controlled, and he's internally balanced, he's content. Let's violate some of his boundaries. So what happens? He is influenced, he's uncontrolled, he's got external validation, trying to make the world work with all these external factors, and he's super stressed. So architecture is the medium between the artificial and natural worlds. Building physics makes this medium the best it can be by working with both the artificial and natural worlds. So the same applies to a home or a building. So when we've got this building that's got all this stuff that's happening, it's influenced, it's uncontrolled. It's the indoor-outdoor dream that Australia and New Zealand loves. And it is 100% uncomfortable. Or maybe it's better now because we build better, but pretty uncomfortable. How do we get to this point where we've got uninfluenced, controlled? Yes, we have indoor-outdoor climate, which is separate, and it's comfortable. Well, let's build boundaries. So we set our goals by building boundaries to get us to places. So the first boundary we build is airtightness. And this is building the wall, so stopping things coming in that you don't really want to influence your goal. The second boundary is thermal bridges, which alludes to persistent temptations, those niggling things that, oh, no, that goal's not good. Let's not do that now. Let's just fail a bit. So thermal bridges is this one. Supportive friendships is as fresh air. So we've got to have some fresh air to help us move along our goal and help us understand the other perspectives. And, oh, yeah, it's great. So good to hang out with you. Yeah, thanks for that. I'm a bit refreshed. I'll move on with my goal. And the fourth one is windows, which is passions and delights. We've got to have some delight in our lives to help them improve and help us succeed further. There's little treats of nature that come in, which is excellent. And so I usually look at that analogy because people connect with all these things. They understand if they've got to go somewhere and move forward, they put together these 4 goals and barriers and understand that with their home. And when we do that, when we have warm summer weather, we cool down to the highest threshold and warm up to the lowest threshold in cool weather. And here's Phil, who's fixed his boundaries. He's now done the inner work that us designers do. He's got the balanced emotions, he's kicking goals, he's healthy, and he's thriving. So passive house just patrols boundaries. So do we just do the same thing? So the problem here, and I've used passive house as the English word. That's fine. We can amend that later. Is we get super excited. We say, yeah, we've got this awesome thing. It's going to be amazing. It's going to change the world. We're going to be able to not mine anymore. We're going to, pull the sky down and say hello to the birds. And we end up doing something like this. And I'll pause here for a moment and say, just how long does it take you to digest that? And it's confusing. It's like, well, where are we going with this? Who's this nerd? What's he talking about? We end up looking like that when we really want to look like that. And so we need to be able to communicate effectively so that we're not just this little niche, golem market, or I don't know, something along those lines where you just, creative, but, totally nerdy, but creative. So we need to be able to communicate effectively. So why do we give the darn? Well, we give the darn because we want to know that what we're doing, and we're doing the best we can with what we know. And we also take early action because we know it's more likely to be implemented. We just need a more effective way to communicate. And so I've spent months putting together a sheet that all you got to do is you paste your passive house file in and it generates all these graphs, just like that. So you paste the name of the passive house file in and it generates graphs. It connects with the PHPP. It's a separate workbook. It's got a single dwelling focus because that's my main clientele, so sensible. And it connects with the Australian code, which has these cooling heat loads and total loads, and it's got an ease of reading in mind. So the next few slides are going to be some graphs and diagrams that might be a bit busy, but it's what I include in my reports. So I just wanted to show you as a bit of a sample of what I thought was good communication upfront early with the client, with the architect, with whatever team you need, and the builder as well, because we bring a lot of builders across. So first little change, climate data. It's now got the Australian climate zone in it. That's a pretty easy call out. Next one is modifying the heating and cooling balance to pull out the major numbers. So you know that has a bit more importance, and everything else is just in the legend with percentages. So you got an idea of what's going on pretty quickly. Then we move into a summary sheet that gives you like areas of what's going on. And the great thing is it fits with the Microsoft Word margins. So I found that was great. So I just pasted it in, done, not a problem. I know what's going on. It means you need to reformat things to make it work. But that's why I've got something like that brings all the metrics down to a point where you can say, yeah, there's a tick, it meets, it doesn't meet, and you can see it quite clearly. And how, what's working and what's not. We move into glazing, gives you a good area. A lot of places I work like the 40%. People bring me a 40%, even a 55%. I had 55% window area to floor area once. I thought, yeah, great. Okay, let's challenge this. And so that was good. So we get that. And then we get another graph there that gives you an overview of what the form factor is. So you really connect the dots on the circular graph. It tells you what the form factor is. It's a square, this house. And other houses are more elongated. Others are not. Some have south skew in one way, and it gives you summary. And then moving into shading recommendations, pulling out based off heat loads in summer and winter. It gives recommendations of what one should do. And then it gives a balance of each window to allow me to say, oh yeah, no, that fits, that doesn't fit. Let's give these to the client to make sure they know where we're coming from. And that just clicked for some reason. Okay, opaque elements, walls, floors, roof. I add in, at the moment, I add in what the R value is, the added R value, because that's a good thing with the Australian context. I'll work out a way to automate it. Give me a few months. And then I also add in the low energy building on the PER graph, so that we know that there's something that can happen. I've had houses achieve low energy building And it's still a good thing. And it still actually achieved the energy demand of passive house, but just didn't meet the air tightness, low energy building. Then I did a whole lot of exploration with off-grid clients and they, oh, what's our solar power got to be? What's our battery got to be? Well, you know, Google's out there. Let's see what Google says and put something together in Excel and generate some things. So here we have loads coming out of passive house. We have the solar PV system coming out of passive house, and we balance it until the lowest point exceeds the optimal battery size. Then we move to the battery and we say, okay, I also look at EPW files and work out how many cloudy days there are before sunny days. What does that mean for storage? How many days does my battery have to store? So that's also the same, just putting the file name in, graph is generated. And then we run through all the metrics to say, yes, in this particular home, 17 kilowatt hour solar PV is fine. It's going to meet it with a 27.39 kilowatt battery. This is for off-grid design. We then do optimize it. And after calling out all the energy usage assumptions from the PHPP, we say that at this point, that's what it uses per month. And further on, and I'll click the next slide as well, it gives us what happens if we then reduce the battery size to 90%, 80%, 70%. So if the off-grid client wants to then use a generator for 30% of their usage, or we're not targeting off-grid, but we know what the battery size, a specified battery size will give us in terms of battery storage and usage versus what the town would supply. So that's another handy one to then just look at quickly to see what's going on. And it's important when you have a localized standard, which Australia does, to give an understanding of the benefit based on that standard. So here, I take the heating, the cooling, and the total loads from the NatHERS standard. It's called NatHERS standard. And I give it an effective star rating based on what the heating, cooling, and total loads are from the PHPP. So you get an effective star rating, and then the clients just have this light bulb moment. Oh, that's what you're talking about. Now I get passive house. I mean, what's this 15 kilowatts per hour per square meter per annum? And what the hell is that? And you think, well, I get it now because I know what 8.4 is compared to 7. Even if it's a bit logarithmic and it's different for different climate zones, they get it because they've had ratings come in from other professionals that do NatHERS, which, you know, do as well, but this seems to be more effective. And we also have another thing in the NCC, just came out last year, 2022, called Specification 44, which gives you the metrics to calculate the heat loads based on your climate. We'll get into that a little bit further. To make this house meet the Australian heat loads and cooling loads, notice here it says no, and there it says yes, we adjusted the cooling. And that tells me that there's something important about looking at both at the same time. There's something important about looking at another tool that's had decades of study and understanding of the local climate and seeing what they've come up with in terms of the heat and cooling loads. And so looking at those together allows me to make the adjustments to then inform the client more appropriately. So then we get clients, and the clients really, they have a budget. They have a minimal budget. They really want best practice. They want passive house, and we make it meet it. And it also has to meet compliance, but it's got to meet the budget as well. So we're going like as low as we can, and then in terms of budget and best practice. So what does that mean? We need to optimize the building envelope as much as we can. And so we ended up, third option was a square house, perfectly square house. This is in country New South Wales, and square, it's around bedrooms plus around 35 square meters per occupant. So it's on the smaller scale for Australia, even though it's probably the average, but there are more people in this home. And we worked out the floor plan, optimized it. It's built out of straw, and we worked out the windows. So we worked out what window sizes should be. And it doesn't have to look ugly when you have smaller windows. You can detail it so that you use the materials right. You build something up to a sill, you build something down to a header, and it's not decorated by sheer laziness of a full height window, just because we know how to design something that then is optimized. And it's a beautiful home, and the clients wanted that kind of look, so that's what we went for. It has a floor insulation of around 2.27, around, yeah. Wall insulation is straw, so it can't be less than 5.3, and the upper part is R4 because we needed that structurally. The roof insulation's 8.5. I boosted that up so that we could have a little bit more window area where we wanted to open up to the outside. And our window values are 1 and an SHGC of 0.54. Timber triple glazed. Because it gets cold and young where this was. So the form factor is this. So we've got 218 square meters, including windows. The wall area is about on par with the floor area. The roof area is higher because it's got a slope and it's got a little bit at the top. And the windows are around 19%, which we found to be quite effective for this design in this climate and the amount of sun it gets. Without optimization of the building envelope, I expect that this home would cost around 130 to 100%, 140% more than it came in at. And at the time, the cost was around 4,000 to 4,500 a square metre New Zealand dollars in Australia. I've seen standard builds cost like upwards of 7, because too many windows. Okay, another example, take you somewhere else. Southern Glazing, worked on a house with Talina Edwards out in the country, Victoria. It's called the Huff and Puff House. It's posted on a few things in LinkedIn. And what we had here was southern and northern glazing. Now, the clients wanted southern glazing because there's spectacular views there compared to the north. The north looked uphill. So what we did was we balanced it out and gave this metric, and then also demonstrated that, okay, with enough northern glazing, you can have the southern glazing and balance it out that way. And so that was able to progress through. I know I've got 4 minutes. So we've got a national standard called NAFERS. And what I've found is when I've implemented the same metrics into the PHR or PHPP, it comes up with a very similar result, 61.5 and versus 62.11. So it's pretty similar. Terms of full thresholds are not required in every state in Australia. Specification 44, heat loads, cooling loads, and total loads. So what happens here is it gives you the limit, and I just want to point out that that's pretty close to what NatHERS does. So this is a reminder of where we are here. So that's, yeah, that bit we do. Annual heating demand, annual cooling demand includes dehumidification, and the cooling energy demand is the sum of both. And TFA is effectively 100% because that's airtight. So I argue that. And I'll just blaze through these. It's just data. You can find these online. This is the ANSI ASHRAE 140 tool. Or 140 tool is the PHPP, therefore it's compliant with the code. That's another argument I use. And then pulled apart all these EPW files to work out how to get the heating load, cooling load, and total loads, and dehumidification gram hours, and So that worked. We've got the data, and we had a big party when we generated the report. So not a problem. So now we can talk like for like in Oz, and this is key. This is key to the communication moving forward. We can say what we want and how it affects what clients will want in the future. But what does it look like in New Zealand? Just so you know what the similar thing looks like, because I'm talking about communication, right? So in Auckland, we've got heating degree hours of that, the metric of 13,000 roughly. The metric of the SPEC 44 comes up with 14.3 kilowatt hours per square metre per annum. In Wellington, it's 26,000, about 30.1 kilowatt hours per square metre per annum. And so we're adjusting the metric to give like a weighted energy load for different climates. So if you've got a harsher climate, you get more energy to work with. That's how Australia works. And in Hamilton, it's 26,000, 29.8, more humid, dehumidification degree hours. And then in Queenstown, it's like, what, 64.15 was quadruple what Passive House was. And yeah, ASHRAE, ANSI ASHRAE compliant, and which is also PHPP is the foundation of Homestar rating. So it's quite relevant to be able to look at something like SPEC 44. So why not calculate heating, cooling, and total loads in New Zealand? Could be done. Now it's competition time. Pick through, remember this house, remember those specs, This is what happens. There's your total loads. What happens in Auckland? Well, it doesn't comply with the standard, with the spec 44, with the cooling bit, but it complies in Patrick House still, which is great. R1.5, this is down to compliance methods. I know the time's there, and I'm almost at the end. And it doesn't comply with anything there, and it complies with very little on the Passive House standard. So that's a lot of it's to do with humidity, different humidity between Young and Auckland. Bump it up to upgrade the windows. That fixes moisture, which is really important to me. So whenever I bring something down, I'll make sure I bump it up enough to fix moisture if it has to be compliant design. If it's got to be compliant design and nothing more, then I make sure that that's ticked. So that's super important. And yeah, Wellington works with the same specs, and Christchurch works with triple glazing for the same specs. So no change to the specs of the code, the appliance code. Varying heat loads, varying heat loads, cooling loads, and total loads works, and it makes it affordable, and it poses a good argument for the government to say, okay, well, let's try and lift up some things. Let's try and make it a bit better. So in the end, what do we take away? Well, back to our analogy, aim better than ACH5, design out thermal bridges where you can, make air tightness or fresh air choosable. So ERV or window ventilation, aim for around 5%, as the code says. And optimize as much as you can the windows, optimize your windows as much as you can until you cannot. And make sure we speak our client's language and we look like that. Thank you.